All right, welcome to night edition of the Prospect Podcast. We have a great guest on today, Rob Assis from Homewood Flossmoor High School. He's also runs his own facility. I think it's Revolution Training, and we're excited to really talk to him um, about the whole speed world. He's an assistant track coach there at Homewood. And before I do that, before we talk more with Coach, Derek's right there. What are you eating a sandwich over there? What do you? We got Coach DePascal over there with us as always, and well, we're really excited to talk some more speed and talk athlete development, which is one of the always the hottest topics on our show, and we've explored it in many different ways, and we apply it to the athletes that we work with, and we hope that you as listeners start to apply it as well and figure out which ones work for you and start to apply those principles. So, Coach, it's great to have you on. I'm really excited to talk to you. If you could go into just your background as a coach and um, where you come from and how you started really kind of developing your program and your development program from that standpoint.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I am a math teacher and track coach at Homewood Flossmoor. So I've been doing this for, I think this is my 23rd year. Growing up, I played just about every sport you could imagine, primarily football, basketball, baseball. But my junior year of high school, my football coach told me that I needed to be out on the track getting faster. So I did that and actually fell in love with track, ended up competing in that senior year. I went on to college to Millikan University and ran track all 4 years there. And since I've been at HF, I've been doing the track thing. I was a head girls coach for 9 years and then moved over to the guys side. So I've been over there since, and I've been an assistant because I didn't like dealing with the headaches that came with being the head coach. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And along the way, I've certainly learned from a lot of great people, and I've had a lot of different experiences within coaching that have kind of framed where I'm at. So and I'm fortunate to get to work with some incredible people. So it's been a lot of fun.
No doubt. Now, from a speed and development standpoint, when you is that what you're working with, primarily sprinters? Are you working with all the athletes?
Yeah. So as the assistant, I am primarily dealing with our jumpers, so long jump, triple jump, high jump. But obviously, there's a huge overlap that occurs with the sprinters. So my main technical side is with the jumpers, but we're also, every one of them is sprinter, and that's so yes, I would say I'm also dealing with the sprinters on the regular basis for sure.
And how about on the training facility? So, what are you guys focusing? Is it you're training athletes? What are some of the areas that you're focused in on there?
Well, I think primarily, one of the most important things I think that we find is, acceleration is huge. Your ability to get to, certain velocities at certain steps by certain steps really sets the tone for your ability to be effective as an open sprinter. So I think that's kind of where we base a lot of our time with our top group. But at the same time, and actually, this is what I'll be talking about at Track Football Consortium in December. I still think max velocity is a huge component of what we do, and it still holds value. So like when I look at, I don't think social media is a good way to judge how trends are going or anything like that. But when I look at it, I feel like there's constant shifts, right, back and forth, where people are debating acceleration, max velocity, and I feel like the pendulum's swinging a little bit back towards acceleration, which is fine. So I figured I'd start talking. I would talk or present about how I still think that max velocity is a huge piece. But I think those are our two primary pieces overall, and we try to find athlete strengths, athlete weaknesses, and address those at different parts of the season to try to get them to be their best when May rolls around.
Explain a little bit. So we talk about the acceleration versus max velocity standpoint. What is the kind of what is the debate over there from that standpoint? Meaning, which is more important in your development, or what is the debate on that?
Yeah, that's what I feel like. People are. I don't want to say one is more important than the other, and from a track perspective, like I said, I think it's huge to be able to accelerate it effectively. One, to set up your top end speed for sure, and potentially hit that top end speed a little bit further down the track. To be honest, but that's a little bit different from team sports. But I think the debate is like, and I've heard this many times from like field court coaches, is that my athletes aren't ever going to run more than 20 meters in gameplay. So why would I train max velocity? And I think that's, in my opinion, max velocity is one of the most unique training stimuluses you can come across. So if you don't go beyond 20 meters, you're not going to hit max velocity, and you're leaving things on the table there. So I think that's where I've seen most of the debate is like, I don't need to do this because my athletes are never going to do that in gameplay.
That's an interesting point. So, yeah, and it makes sense 100% from a track standpoint. If you're running a 100-meter dash, reaching max velocity farther down the track can be helpful, obviously, because you're going to be able to lose less of your speed as you get through those last 30 meters. 34. Well, I guess in high school it's probably 40 meters. So. And so there is a difference from that standpoint. But what's interesting is I'm curious on acceleration versus max velocity. So I understand why ball sports, right? Why they're not as concerned with max velocity. But I'm curious if one plays into the other or back and forth. Meaning, if your max velocity improves, can your acceleration speed improve? Is there a correlation there, or are they two separate ends of the spectrum that are being developed? So if someone has the ability to reach a higher max velocity, can they reach a higher rate of acceleration? Or is it kind of unrelated? Like if you're developing your acceleration, someone could reach whatever their max acceleration is, regardless of whether they're able to reach their best top end speed. And that's my part A on the question. So I'd love for you to answer that first, because then I have a second part that I think maybe if the answer goes the way I think it might, where some of the sport and court coaches might miss out.
Sure. So I think I know I'm guilty of this, and I think, and it's mainly because of how we structure training. But I think it's common for us to view acceleration as one component and max velocity as another. But I don't really think you can separate the two. So here's what I mean by that. Like, and this is the obvious one. Like, if you are doing a workout that is max velocity focused, let's just say fly 10s or something like that. Obviously, to get to that maximum velocity, you are going to accelerate. Unless you're working on a high speed treadmill and getting dropped right onto it, right? So from that standpoint, absolutely, I think you can improve acceleration just by doing a workout that is focused on max velocity. So that's one piece. I think that it is good to have a day where you are maybe doing shorter sprints, though, because you can attain a higher volume of practicing acceleration, right? So, and anytime you're doing an acceleration workout, even though you're not hitting max velocity, the way that I view it is I am working on improving my ability to set up a higher max velocity in future sessions down the road. So I think they're always connected, even though you may not be focusing on one, you're focusing on one particular day potentially. It's still, they're still connected all the time.
Yeah, I think they're definitely interconnected. I think the other, and this is kind of where I set this up. Now, football is a little different than, I guess football and soccer, and maybe lacrosse may have a greater opportunity to reach max velocity in their sport if you're in a breakaway situation or you're in a chase
Mhm.
situation, right? Where I don't know, you got to chase somebody on a streak play, and you got to be able to keep up with them. But what I think is really so yeah. So you said there obviously is a correlation between the two, and what to me it seems like from just kind of a layman terms, like the ability to shift gears into getting towards max velocity, that gear change from going from acceleration to max velocity. The athletes that have that ability to do that are the ones that score more touchdowns, at least on the offensive side, and on the defensive side defensive backs, for example, have the ability, or maybe even safeties, have the ability to get in a situation where they can use makeup speed, which can save a play or make up for a mistake if something happens. So I look at it like I see so many times in high school, kids who have excellent acceleration break into the open, and then um, they're not able to reach max velocity and they get caught from behind from someone who's chasing who is able to reach
Mhm.
some level of max velocity, right?
Mhm.
And so then they always go and say, well, that person's quick, but he's not fast, right? So
Yep.
that's always but to me, there's an element to it. Obviously, some people, depending on their height and stuff like that, some people might reach their max velocity quicker or have to work more at reaching max velocity. But what to me it is that they just haven't worked on any level of max velocity. And they've heavily focused on acceleration and never and haven't been able to get that gear shift, which will take you to max velocity. That's what it kind of like when I see it. And I've seen a few players this year I watched at the high school level that I think are wow, this kid's super fast, but he doesn't reach max velocity. So if someone if it is a long run, he could get caught from behind. Am I on to something from that standpoint, or am I like whale face?
Yeah, I think for sure, and I think I've seen it in a few different ways. But one thing I talk about all the time, and I think a lot of times you have to keep in mind like what the constraints are in regards to the game, right? So
Right,
if I'm a running back, and I'm in traffic, I need to keep my feet close to the ground because I'm going to have to consistently make cuts and moves to try to avoid people. Um, so that's part of the gameplay. That's very different than accelerating in track, right? Um, but with that being said, once you are able to get in the open, like I talk about the importance of being able to get upright and run with maybe not like perfect track mechanics, right? But like
right.
execute pretty solid max velocity mechanics to be able to not get caught. Yeah, I think that's absolutely a thing. And I think exposure to it is really the only way that you can improve that quality. Sure, like a kid with a low training age could probably get some benefits in their max velocity just by, doing things in the weight room. But I think that's going to correlate more towards their ability to accelerate and not necessarily carry over to what you would see when they're at like their top end speed.
Yeah, that's 100%. I think that's really interesting too. Is that the max velocity component of what I was thinking was if you think back to like um, the '80s, let's say, or maybe still even in the early '90s when you had or in modern era maybe a running back like Adrian Peterson, okay, would fit in the mode of a lot of the '80s running backs and the '90s running backs,
Mhm.
where you would say Walter Payton was like an acceleration guy, had the ability to accelerate, but would get caught quite often, on breakaway runs. Tony Dorsett, Bo Jackson, Herschel Walker,
Eric
there was
Dickerson.
yes, there was Eric Dickerson. There was a large amount of guys that were who were really like actually max velocity guys, and a lot of them in the '80s and '90s, and Adrian Peterson was a track guy too. So we're track guys, right? We're track was it's a huge thing. Obviously, the times are faster than ever, and you know this better than I do. But like, I see the 100-meter dash times. I can't believe how many guys run under 10 seconds in high school. It's mind blowing to me. I call it trackflation, and everybody else on the internet calls it trackflation, right? But but obviously you have better training. You have guys knowledgeable like yourself who can develop kids at the high school level. But like in the 80s, you had like the football players that ran track. That was kind of like your lifting was big, but it wasn't like it is now where you can where kids focus. And what I think you had a lot more of was breakaway running backs that if they got into the open, just literally outran people because they were able to get upright, like you said, and to be able to continue to reach max velocity. Where I think a lot more the focus now is a lot more than Adrian Peterson and maybe Derrick Henry are exceptions to that. But you see a lot more of the backs that are footed, right, and acceleration heavy, and may not be even track guys. May just never really get to that level of max velocity. And I think that it's interesting because at the highest level, meaning like NFL, guys like Chris Johnson, when he was playing, and Adrian Peterson, what made them so effective, even in the modern era, was the fact that they could get to max velocity. Like they could get to that level, whereas some of the other really good runners, Jonathan Taylor, I would say, can get to max velocity, even though he's not like a tall back like those guys are, but he has that, and he was a sprinter himself, and a track guy himself. And he's able to get to max velocity. I've seen, but it's not as prevalent as it once was. Like it wasn't like it almost used to be like a requirement, in the old days, like as for a running back to be able to do that, and that now you don't see that as much. Do you think that's a part of it, like either an emphasis in the training, or is it because I think that's just how. I think in the old days, they probably just ran track, and their coach was coaching for the 100-meter dash, and they kind of naturally maybe developed it without even really kind of per se working on it. Whereas now, they're going to trainers and they're working a ton of quick foot drills. Like their feet are lightning, these kids, and their quick acceleration is unbelievable. But then they're not able to go into gear 2 or 3.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that's I can remember. Probably 10, over 10 years now, sitting with Tony Holler talking about it. And, I told him with the Track Football Consortium, I was like, you guys are onto really something special. And I think that's kind of been his mission, is to, bring awareness to the importance of sprinting at max velocity. And I think we're starting to see, a lot of schools utilize it as a quality training modality, which is exciting. But yeah, I think the specialization is still prevalent, and the multi-sport idea I think is in pockets really popular, but in other areas it's like athletes are just focused on one thing. And I think it's important for athletes to play multiple things. From my standpoint as a track coach, I want every one of our jumpers, our sprinters, to play football, because they're going to get exposure to thousands of accelerations during the course of a season, right? And that's so valuable from a training perspective. It's perfect, in my opinion, heading into a track season. And I think it's the same thing when you look at for a football program. Like I would want my wide receivers and running backs, DBs, to run track, to just get a different exposure, where they're really just focused on maximizing outputs and also getting good technical instruction and getting that exposure to running upright.
I think, that's actually a really good point. And I do think that from a recruiting shifted so much in football. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure as to. I used to be pretty sure that there was like a window of time where like, like guys wanted to know the track times of guys, and recruiting's so different now in the last few years because of transfer portals. So like they're obviously they're not looking at that when they're getting a transfer, you know what I mean, from one school, then they could care less. They're just looking at their production. But obviously for a high school athlete to have a chance to get recruited as a skill player, I think that may be more important than ever. It's just not emphasized because they have no way to relate you to a 22-year-old who they can get as a transfer, right? So how do I compare a 17-year-old to a 22-year-old without knowing how fast he really is in a skill position? And you know, I say this with even linemen and defensive players, like, you know, things like you know, whether they play for defensive linemen or basketball, like whether they play basketball or like are they good at another sport, actually is pretty helpful. Or they're a shot putter, discus thrower type of guy, you know, is really, really helpful. But with respect to skill position players, how do you find out? Like, that's going to be, I think that's the hardest thing. Like, when so many kids that we look at and we deal with, and they're like, well, I ran this 40, you know, at a camp, and maybe they did. Maybe they ran 4.6. Okay. Well, there's a 22-year-old that runs 4.6 that is 20 pounds bigger than you because he's a man. Maybe not tall or anything, but like more developed because he's a man. So I'm taking that. In most cases, I'm taking that man first, right, at the higher levels. So track times could be, and the ability to accelerate is an equalizer. You know, Tyreek Hill, obviously, you know, for the longest time, not only was he quick and can accelerate, but if he got in the open, it was like lights out because he reaches max velocity. Is there simple tools from a training standpoint that, let's say, an athlete that maybe they don't run track can do to start to be able to develop max velocity?
I think one, I mean, just going out and sprinting, you know, further than I would say 30 meters, 30 yards is a start. So that's always I think where I would probably start. If it's something that they haven't done on the front end, I think you know, just from a safety perspective, always running up a slight incline is a good thing. Just from kind of like, if you've never been exposed to it or haven't been exposed to it regularly, that's always a good place to start, because I knock on wood, but I've never seen anyone ever pull a hamstring during a hill workout ever. So, you know, if you're focused on like max velocity, you want that incline of the hill to be very slight. And then other tools that I really like, this would incorporate the acceleration and max velocity. It's called the bullet belt. So the bullet belt is fantastic. And if I was coaching football, I'd have 50 of these suckers. And because it's just so, it hits three big things. One, you have a teammate who would be holding the bullet belt. So they're in a position that is very similar to what they would be if they are trying to decelerate. So they're providing that resistance. Their hips are low, and they're braking. You know, so they're getting that deceleration exposure. So it's an advantage for the person who's helping assist with the rep. And then the cool thing with the bullet belt is it gets them in good acceleration position. So it's just like a harness, a waist harness. Yep. And then it has Velcro on it. So there's like a rip cord. And, you know, you can have an athlete like pull with resistance for 10 yards, let's say. And then the athlete who is providing the resistance can slowly pull the rip cord maybe over the next 5 yards or something like that. And so it provides kind of like a little transition. And then the athlete is fully released from the resistance, and then they can continue the sprint there. So you're getting kind of like a multi-tiered sort of training stimulus. You get your like heavy acceleration, you get your transition, and then you get your sprint after that. So I think that is a really great tool. I would call that like isodynamic resistance. It's, you know, a little cheaper than getting like a Dynaspeed or 1080 sprint. You know, you can get a bullet belt for, you know, a little bit over $100, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. The bullet belt is great to have one of those. at home. I use that on my son, and it's phenomenal because it gives that jolt where you have to accelerate. And then what about stuff like changing speed? So when they're running, like when they roll in, they hit a certain level of acceleration, they roll back, then they reaccelerate,
Sure.
or they roll in, accelerate, and then try to lift a little more or lift the drive. Do you do anything like those kind of type of drills? Do they have
Absolutely. You're speaking my language here for sure. So, I love flying sprints. I think
Yep.
they are fantastic, but I do think it's important to be able to have some other tools in the toolbox. So, one that I'm really a big fan of, I think it's the most versatile tool anyone can have, is just what I would call it a crescendo sprint. So it's very simple. You're just starting out at a slow speed, and maybe every 10 yards you're building a little bit more. So you tell the athlete, hey, by the 20-yard line, I want you to be at 70%. By the 30, I want you to be at 80, and progressively go to wherever however long you want that to be. That's been a huge tool for me in terms of, like, I've had athletes who are like, coach, I'm just not feeling it today. So, and we had like flying sprints scheduled. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just try this crescendo sprint. And you're going to build up to like 80%. And then they come back and they say, that felt okay. And I'm like, okay, let's build this one up to 90%. And they're like, that felt okay. All right, let's go 95. It feels good. Can I try a fly now? Like, yes, you can. So
Right.
I think that's been a really good tool. And I think you're getting exposure to different gears and just a little more awareness of like what intensity you're running at. And I think that's super important. That ability to change gears in football is absolutely imperative. But then the other piece, like you were mentioning, is that I'm a huge fan of. We use this with our jumpers all the time. We call them sprint float sprints, or ins and outs. So you're building up to let's just say top speed. You hit that window of speed for maybe 10 meters. Then you back off for maybe 20, where you're running at like 90% or 95%. And then you come back and you hit another 20-meter window of like top end. So the theory in it is that, and there's not much research because you can't really research this, because how can you know if somebody's really at like giving their 90% in that float phase?
Right.
But the argument is you hit that window of max speed to start, and then by kind of sort of backing off the accelerator a little bit, it's kind of like when the feeling that a car has when it gets you're in cruise control and you hit that velocity and you just kind of feel it cruise,
Right.
That's kind of what you want in that float window. But the argument is in that float window that your nervous system has enough time to recover, so then you can hit another window of speed that is a little bit faster. So the advantage to that is, I think you can get really, like, we run those reps about 80 meters. So it's like a 30-meter build, a 10-meter sprint, a 20-meter float, a 20-meter sprint. But really, you're getting like 50 meters of really quality upright sprinting with that component of changing gears. So I just think it's a really athletic thing. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of pretty cool equipment where we can measure to actually see what their velocity is throughout. I just started using that last year, and it was amazing. Like, just in terms of like to see where exactly they were throughout that whole entire time. And most of the time they were hitting a faster speed in the float, which is when they were trying less. That's it. That's probably the case for like 80% of kids.
What tool were you using for that? Are you using like a GPS, or are you using timing system?
I have a Muscle Lab laser. So it's you actually put it either behind the athlete or in front of the athlete, and the laser is like shooting from behind them, so it's always on the athlete. So it's not like they're running through timing gates. It's the laser is always
right.
on.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's like that. What's the other one that's similar? Like the Stalker radar gun is similar to that. Like they have an option there, but it's different in that the beam is always on them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. I didn't even. I'm sure it's on simplyfaster.com, by the way, or some version of it. Because I go on there, there's like 9,000 products on there that are, I'm like, go down a rabbit hole that it never ends. That I'm like, oh, I'd love to have that toy, but I can't. That toy is $10,000. But yeah, there's all kinds of great stuff on there. It's amazing the different tools. This is why I asked that question, because there are so many emerging tools that are out there that are starting to really help you measure some